This together. It really is an excellent program. I've already learned a lot. Thank you, Stuart Cohen, for introducing me to Joe. I'm very happy to be a part of this, and Maggie and everyone else for all your hard work, and mostly all the parents here today. It's really awesome to see your involvement, and one of the things that I think is most important is parental involvement. So to see you guys all here today just shows that there are really good parents out there, and there's a lot of really good opportunities, but especially with schools, you have to fight for them. And you're obviously the parents that are fighting for it, so your kids are really going to get the most. So congratulations to you. And here we go. So start with just the legal definition of a disability. A disability is any restriction or lack of ability to perform an activity resulting from an impairment. So what's interesting about a disability and why everyone should really care about it is because at any time, any one of us could be affected by a disability. So just because we may not have had a disability yesterday doesn't mean that we may not have a disability tomorrow. And how this translates into schools and education law is that just because your child may not have been labeled as a student with a disability in grade A, now that they're in grade B, they may be. So a school can't ever say, oh, well, no, your child has never been labeled with a disability, so they're not this year, but it could happen at any time. So that's important to note. It's also important just to take a moment to talk about how we refer to people with disabilities, and that's just it. It's a person with the disability, so you always want to make sure that you put the person first and then the disability after, because when we're programming for the child, we're programming for the child. We're not programming for the disability. And that's where labels can play a role. So sometimes labels are necessary. We need to know what things are, and it's convenient to be able to group things nicely. But it's also important to be careful with the labels we choose, because people will live up or down to our expectations. So we want to make sure that we keep our expectations high, and we want to make sure that our labels are go with that. And this people first language is how we do it. We want to make sure that just a quick example, if there's an autistic student, you would refer to them as a student with autism, not an autistic student, because you're programming for the student, not for the autism. I actually recently heard a really cool quote by an anonymous philosopher, and I think it sums up really nicely why labels are often ineffective. But the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing that it doesn't belong in fruit salad. So just because something may fall under a specific category doesn't mean that you can treat it like everything else under that category. So we always want to make sure that, again, we're programming for the student, and this is when, as parents, when you're in IEP meetings, you want to make sure that a teacher or a director of special ed never says something like, this is what we do for autistic kids. You want to say, well, you know what, that's not who we're programming for. We're programming for my child with autism. All right, so today I want to try to touch on working with your child's school, and I think, from a legal perspective, it really is important to first work with the school, because you can oftentimes get a lot done with just you and the teachers and the principals and maybe the administrators, but I'm going to give you some tips on how to better work with your school. Knowing the law, of course, staying informed, and then with most things in life, addressing problems as they occur, because things will obviously get worse before they get better if you don't do anything about it. And here's the ideal situation. Here's how we need it to be. The student and the parent and the school all working together, and you have that middle ground, that ideal middle ground where everybody's involved. And too often it can be the parent and the school, or the parent and the school working together and forgetting the student, when a lot of times it's the parent saying, it's the school's fault, and it's the school saying it's the parent's fault, or they need this and the kid needs that. But if you bring the child in and ask the child what they actually want and what they actually feel that they need, you can really gain a lot of insight from a child. And it's important to keep them just as involved as the parent and as the school. And then way off, you want to keep the attorneys if you can. But if you do need them, then they'll come right into the mix. But it is better if the three parts can work together. So special ed law and education law, over the entire United States, it's controlled by the federal law. And the controlling federal law is IDEA, and that's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. and that was redone a little bit in 2005, and it's now referred to as the IDEIA, but it's actually still referred to as IDEA for short. So IDEA controls the nation as a whole. Now that's the base floor. That sets the minimum standards at which schools and states must comply. So now states they have to at least meet those federal standards, but they can give more. They just can't give less. And to see what your state promises you, for Pennsylvania, that's chapter 14 of PA code, 22 PA code, and that shows what the state must do. And Pennsylvania has a lot to offer. You'll see, I do Pennsylvania, New Jersey. You'll see slight differences. There's certain areas in the law where New Jersey offers more protections, and there's certain areas in the law where PA offers more protections, but they at least have to meet the federal minimum standards. And then beyond that, if your school district sets their own standards that are higher than the state and the federal standards, they have to live up to those standards. So it's always worthwhile to go through your particular school district's handbooks so you can see exactly what your school promises you. Not too often will they set their standards higher, but if they do, that was a decision that was made by the school board and other administrators, and they have to abide by their own standards. So IDEA, what it promises us and what it promises children and entitles them to is FAPE. So FAPE's the big word, and that stands for a free, appropriate public education. And FAPE is what you're trying to prove in lawsuits, a denial of FAPE. So the school's trying to say, we gave you FAPE. They're saying, we gave you a free and appropriate, so appropriate's the key word, public education. And then the battle and the controversy becomes what's appropriate. So that's where the fight is, that's where it lies, deciding if the child really did receive that appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, which is the second part of the equation. I'll get into least restrictive environment later, but along with FAPE, the supports and services designed to meet the student's individual needs as designated in their IEP. So the IEP now supersedes everything. So there's the federal law, then there's the state law, then there's what your school promises, then there's what you can get in the IEP. And that becomes the final controlling, absolutely legal document where once something is in this IEP, now it's the school's responsibility to provide it. So if the school mentions in an IEP that this child may need a psychiatric evaluation, now it's up to the school to fund a psychiatric evaluation, even though that's something that schools generally would not do. And if it's in the child's IEP to have an iPad or another assistive technology device, they're not saying, parent, now go home and buy your child an iPad. There's a really strong argument that now it's a school's responsibility to provide that iPad. So you want to get as much as you can in the IEP, because once it's in the IEP, now it's the school's responsibility to provide that item or that service. With Comp Ed, compensatory education, which are funds that are awarded to you if it turns out and if you can prove you were denied FAPE, you have to quantify how much FAPE you were denied. And it's the time period that you were denied this appropriate education. And the time period is quantified in a dollar amount through coming up with a number of hours that the child was denied. So in a school year, it's about 1,000 hours of school, and they say there's about, it's about $60 an hour on average to educate a child. So even though a service, a speech pathologist may be $150 or $200 an hour for a good speech pathologist, the value that they give to an education, to a public education, is about $60 an hour. So if you can prove that a child missed a year of school, that's about $60,000. So that money is held in a fund, and generally the uses are anything that furthers the IEP. So that it goes beyond the IEP. So we get everything in the IEP, the school provides that, and then if you are ever awarded compensatory education, that's above and beyond what the school promises in the IEP. So it's very important to try to get everything you can in the actual IEP and leave the rest, if there's Comp Ed, for the things that you want to do for the child outside of what the school has to do. Early intervention is covered. Toddlers age birth to 2, they're eligible. That's under IDEA Part C. So it always is good if you know at an early age that your child has a disability or was born with a disability to try to get services as soon as possible. And there are plenty of advocates out there who are really knowledgeable about this. Miss Ruth in the back is someone who specializes in these early years, so she's worth speaking to if you have the opportunity. All right. Here's something I get a lot. I don't know how many of your children out in the audience are in public school, and that's where your real supports are, and that's where you're really protected in the public school system. There's not much you can do if your child's in private school or in a Catholic school, or another kind of school outside of the public school system, or if they're homeschooled. You kind of give up your rights against the school district. So it is generally in parents' best interest to have their child in the public school, because public schools really do have more funding and more resources. As bad as they try to make the situation out to be, I mean, they're gonna have more money than a private school generally, and they're gonna have more ability to send your child to an approved private school. Your recourse, unfortunately, with a private school is to just take your child out. So if you're not happy there, there's really not too much you can do, because under federal law, it's that free and appropriate public education. So if you're not taking advantage of the public education, you're really not entitled to these laws. So your recourse would just be take your child out of the school and put them into public school. There are certain services that the private school, wherever your private school, whatever intermediate unit they fall into, that they provide, but compared to a public school, it's minimal. It may be a speech and language pathologist comes out once a week, or a reading specialist comes out once a week. But really, generally, on average, your best bet is a public school for services. Special education it's not just that you have or your child has a disability, it's that they also require specially designed instruction. So it's a two-pronged test. You have to show the disability and the requirement for specially designed instruction. And I always like to point out the word unique in this definition, because it's not just thrown in there. It really goes far in court and in case law, the word unique, to show that every child's treated differently. And this means that just because something may have never been done in the past doesn't mean that now is not the time to do it. So it's your child, your unique needs. So a school can't ever use as an argument that we've never done this before, because your child is unique, and the law goes out of its way to point to the word unique. Also, the law says that it's instruction conducted in the classroom, home, hospital, and other settings. So if your child may be home for an extended period of time, they're still entitled to homebound instruction, which is different than homeschooling. It's the school sending out someone to educate your child for whatever amount of hours per week you agree on. Generally, it's only 5 hours per week, but it should be more, and you can definitely fight to have more homebound instruction. So yeah, I know I have a limited amount of time, so I just want to try to hit the big points. These slides are available. I think they'll be on the tools website, and they're on my website also. A high school diploma. So a child can go to school generally until 21. I know there's situations where comp ed, instead of getting comp ed awarded in money that you can use for the child, you can get it awarded in time. So the child can actually stay in school past 21. Sometimes that's the right situation and what you want. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's better to have the child graduate and try to find a job or find something that this child can do to keep going, to keep moving forward. Sometimes you need those extra couple years in school as a little bit more of a buffer while you figure things out. But regardless, it at least goes till 21, or when you get a high school diploma. So I know there are definitely situations where a child wants to walk with their graduating class. Keep in mind that you can still walk with your graduating class. They can still be a part of the show, and they can still feel like they're a part of it. They just don't have to receive that diploma. So as long as they don't receive that diploma, they can stay in school. But don't ever let your school tell you that your child can't be a part of the graduation. If they want to be a part of the graduation, and if it's the children that they came up with through the years in their graduation, they should. There's no reason why they wouldn't let your child participate in graduation, not receive a diploma, and still get 2 or 3 more years of school. So special education. So when you're deciding if you want your child in special education, or to get the ball rolling, if the school thinks that your child may belong in special education, receiving special education services, First of all, interventions in the general education classroom, it's the first stop. So special education is not the first stop. The first stop is to see what you can do to keep your child in the general ed classroom with the right supports and services, whether that's an aide or some other type of assistant or assistive technology, whatever it may take to keep your child in the general ed classroom. That's your first stop. Parental consent is required for initial evaluation. So a school can't ever force your child to be evaluated. However, they can take you to due process for that. They don't have to take you to due process, but they can. And the reason that they have that ability is because a school has a child find obligation, and that's their obligation to identify, locate, and evaluate children that may have a disability. So they're entitled to bring you to due process so that they can fulfill their child find obligation. And that really is an affirmative obligation on their part to find children. It's not that a child that with disabilities who may need that specially designed instruction. So they can't just say, oh, we looked, real quick. They actually really do have to investigate and try to find these children. And by them trying to force an evaluation, that shows that they are complying with their child find obligations. However, they can never force you to receive special education services. So even though there's an evaluation, a NOREP will be issued, and the NOREP will say, that's a notification of recommended placement. What the recommended placement is, if you don't sign that NOREP and there's never been a placement in the past, there will not be a placement. They can't force you in the placement. However, if there was a placement and there's a NOREP that they're going to change the placement, you have to make sure that you respond to the NOREP that you do not agree with the placement if you don't agree with the placement. If you do not, then after 10 days, they can have you, they will change the program, and that's fine. They've fulfilled their obligations. If you request an evaluation for your child, the school has 60 days to complete the evaluation. In PA, that does not include summer break. So if it starts before summer break, they have a break during the summer. However, in New Jersey, summer break is included in the 60-day timeline. However, holidays are counted in Jersey. Holidays are not counted in Pennsylvania. See, I know I only have a couple more minutes. I think if there's one thing with IEPs that's the most important, it's just making sure that there's a lot of data. When you go to the IEP meeting, make sure that you're a very meaningful participant. That's what you're entitled to, meaningful participation of the parents. So you want to make sure that the school makes it so that it's a convenient date for you. If you may have work on the day that they offer or suggest the first meeting, ask for another date. They're obligated to do that. If you have language barriers, if there's an interpreter needed, whether it's for hearing impairments or for a language barrier, they have to provide an interpreter. So the school really has to make you a meaningful participant, and you want to make sure that you see a lot of data. And if you see goals and objectives in your child's IEP repeated from year after year, especially ones that look like they were just cut and paste from year after year, that's a red flag that the school's kind of just moving your child along. You want to see specific data that shows, this is what's going on, here's where we want to be, and here's how we're going to get there. And you want to see that constantly changing, whether it's because the child hasn't met the goal, and it should specifically say that they're not quite there yet, let's make the goal a little bit smaller so we can take smaller steps to get to the goal, or if it's that they've met the goal and exceeded it, so now we can make bigger goals for the child. Do I have any more time? Assistive technology, every child should be considered for assistive technology, and that's the law. So in the IEP, it must say that assistive technology was considered, and if it was denied, here's why. And assistive technology can take a lot of shapes and a lot of forms, from iPads to other devices. But when the assistive technology evaluation is done, you want to make sure that there's the speech and language person, the OT person, physical therapy, a physical therapist. You want to make sure that all the parties are involved, because there's a lot of really unique stuff out there that a speech pathologist may use that an OT person may not know about, and vice versa. So you want to make sure that at least these three parties are involved. Speech and language for children with cerebral palsy is obviously a very big issue, and ASHA is the governing body of speech and language pathologists. So I suggest that you do take a look at asha.org, which is their website, and you can get a lot of really good information. And the evaluation, if you ever were to ask for a specific evaluation, it's called an AAC evaluation, and it's augmentative and alternative communication. So AAC can be, you know, it's when we talk and it's mentioned in the slides here, right from the ASHA site, even a smile can be something, just anything other than words that helps a child communicate is assistive technology. Okay. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions, they're probably things that you're personally dealing with, so feel free to just come up and ask me, and I'll help you in any way that I can. Thank you.